And when I started to see the commercials for FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM and Caesars, I was like, wow, that looks like so much fun. I wish I could sports bet. On average, I was gambling for about 12 hours a day. And it all finally came to a head after 6 years. I would max out 3 different credit cards using cash advances. But that's not what did it. That's not what got me to stop gambling. I want to tell you what it was that got me to finally stop. On November the 12th of 2022, I made my last gamble. And now I'm someone in recovery from a gambling addiction. Today, I want to tell you how I got here. It's been almost 1,100 days since I placed my last bet, but it really took a lot out of me before I finally did quit. And so how did I go from making a $5 bet with my friends to the catastrophe of what happened the last day that I gambled, where I would spend 12 hours on a gambling binge, maxing out credit cards just to keep the bet alive? My name's Rob, and as mentioned, I'm in recovery from a gambling addiction. I created this channel because I don't want to see you go down the same path with your life that I went down with mine. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you hear anything that you can relate to, because I want you to learn from my experience and never make the same mistakes. When I first placed a bet, it was a $5 fantasy sports contest with my friends. I grew up near Philadelphia, and we love our sports teams over there. It's the Phillies, Flyers, Sixers, Eagles. No matter where we were at, my friends, my family, the game was always on. A game was always on. If we were having someone's birthday party, it'd be on a Sunday at 1 p.m. because that's when the Eagles game would kick off. If I was hanging out with my friends, we'd meet up at 7 because that's when the Sixers game tipped off. It was just something that was present in our lives. And when we found out about daily fantasy sports, it was a no-brainer that we were gonna get started, because we found out that you could make money while you were watching the sports that you were already watching. It felt amazing. It felt like something that we absolutely had to do. So my friends and I would put in our $5 contests, and no matter if they won or they lost, they were content with whatever happened. I, on the other hand, if I lost, absolutely had to take the 10 o'clock game just so that I could try to get the money back. And if I won, it felt like I had extra money to play with. And this is all within a week of starting. I realized right then and there that it was not gonna be enough for me to just bet on the fantasy sports. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it was me that experienced this and not my friends, but once I got a taste of winning, I couldn't stop. Even a taste of losing, I couldn't stop. I was just so excited to keep going. It made the games feel more exciting, and honestly, without it, I didn't want to watch the games anymore. 1 week after I started doing it. But the fantasy sports contests, they weren't hitting the same. So sure, you could make a couple $100 betting on the games, but it wasn't real sports betting. It didn't feel like the real deal. And when I started to see the commercials for FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM and Caesars, I was like, wow, that looks like so much fun. I wish I could sports bet. And I found a bookie. Now, I started to bet with the bookie, and I reached a point where he was giving me lines of credit that I couldn't afford to pay back if I were to have lost. But in the beginning, things didn't go poorly. I was winning a lot of bets. I felt like I knew what I was doing. And, I was just getting lucky. There was no real skill to it, but to me, it felt like every time I won, it was validation that I knew about sports, that I was a good gambler, that I could win. I could be a professional sports bettor. So when I went off to school, I continued my gambling, and I took University of Maryland, Baltimore County versus Kansas State, following them upsetting Virginia in the first round of the 2018 March Madness tournament. They, of course, lost that game, and my back was up against a wall for the very first time. I got more credit from the bookie instead of telling my family what had happened, and I doubled the amount of pain by losing a bet the next day on spring training baseball. Honestly, it was the first time of many times that I would try to gamble my way out of a situation. No matter how bad things got, I would always remember the times in the beginning where I won, and I'd say, I can get this back. But every once in a while, 6 times over the course of 6 years, I was in so much debt that I couldn't figure out how to pay it back. And I had to tell my family what was going on. I had to borrow money. I had to pay back interest in the end, because I was just continuing to chase until I had absolutely no resources left. Now I want you to remember, just a couple of months before that point, I was betting these small little contests with my friends. I was working at an ice cream store. I was making $8 an hour, and I was putting it into these fantasy sports contests. Within a few months, I was now compulsively gambling to the point where I was going into debt that I couldn't afford with a bookie. That would happen over and over again. Small debts. The big debts I already told you happened a few times, but I was constantly on edge over the 6 years I was placing bets. I was constantly worried, I was constantly anxious, stressed, and constantly thinking about gambling. I like to say that on average, I was gambling for about 12 hours a day. And when people ask, what does that mean? It means I'm either placing a bet, thinking about a bet, or trying to get money so that I can go and make more bets. It had become a total preoccupation. And it all finally came to a head after 6 years of up and down struggle. November the 12th of 2022. Now, I had gone a little bit of time without a bet at this point because I knew I had a problem. But that morning I woke up and I was feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling like it had been X amount of days since I placed a bet, and it had been X amount of days since doing the thing that I loved to do most. And so I made a sports bet in the morning, and honest to God, I don't even remember what it was anymore. I just remember feeling like I wanted desperately to cash the money out, delete the account, self-exclude, and never go back to it. But when I tried to cash out, the casino told me that I couldn't because I had just made a deposit on the same payment method. I had to keep the money in there for an additional 24 hours. So I said, that's not acceptable. I need this money out right now so I can close this account. So what I did was I drove to the casino that was partnered with this app and demanded it in person at the cashier's cage. They of course told me the same thing. And now I turned around and it wasn't numerous days since my last bet. It was just a couple of hours. My willpower was totally gone and I spent the rest of that day, 12 hours as mentioned, on a gambling binge where I would max out 3 different credit cards using cash advances. But that's not what did it. That's not what got me to stop gambling. I want to tell you what it was that got me to finally stop. 8 hours into that day, I had more money in my hand than I had ever had before. If I was to have deposited everything that I had, I wouldn't have been able to pay off all of the credit card debt that I had accrued because there were so many fees and then the inevitable interest that would kick in right away. So I felt like I had to keep chasing and chasing, but I was holding all this money and I had it as loose bills and I put it into my pocket with my phone. And about 8 hours in, I reached into my pocket to grab my phone and all the money fell out on the floor of this casino. And I freaked out. I thought I was gonna get robbed. I thought maybe I left some on the ground when I was scrambling, trying to pick it up, and I was sweating. I was hyperventilating a little bit. I was a little bit drunk too. It wasn't a great mixture of things. And I had this thought: throw the money back on the floor. Because if you put the money back on the floor, someone else might pick it up and leave with it. But if you pick it up, you're just gonna go back out there and gamble every single dollar away. And I wish I had listened to myself. I didn't. But what I realized after I did inevitably lose the rest of the money that day, it was always going to end that way for me. Do you relate to that? Are you someone that, maybe you started gambling with your friends for fun, but now it feels like you can't watch sports without it? Are you someone that, maybe made a $5 bet in the beginning, but now you're borrowing money from people so you can chase your losses? These were really obvious signs that I had a problem, but I kept ignoring them for 6 years until I finally reached a point where I didn't have an answer to the question of why did you just do that? So if you or a loved one is struggling with a gambling addiction, I want you to check out the description of this video for resources to get help. I spent way too long suffering in silence, and I don't want the same for you or anyone that you know. And if you need more proof that you're not the only gambling addict on earth, then I want you to watch this video next. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.